Imagine living in a world where meaning itself seems to dissolve before your eyes, where the things that once gave life purpose, faith, morality, community, are slowly fading, replaced by distractions, consumption, and a silent sense of emptiness that no amount of entertainment can fill. Think about that for a moment. Have you felt it? That quiet disconnection from everything, from others, from yourself, from any sense of why? What if I told you that this growing feeling isn't random? That one of history's most provocative philosophers, Friedrich Nietzsche, saw it coming over a century ago and warned us that it would define the future of humanity. Today we'll explore why nihilism, the belief that life has no inherent meaning or value, is spreading like wildfire in our modern society, and more importantly, how Nietzsche not only predicted it, but also offered the path to overcome it. Before we dive deep into this journey, make sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps us bring you powerful reflections that connect philosophy, psychology, and the challenges of the modern world. Stay until the end, because the final revelation, Nietzsche's ultimate insight into how to transcend nihilism, is perhaps the most important of all. Let's begin. To understand why nihilism is taking over modern society, we must first understand what it really is. Nietzsche described nihilism not as a philosophy, but as a symptom, the inevitable consequence of a world that has lost its highest values. In his book, The Will to Power, he wrote that the highest values devalue themselves. In other words, when the beliefs and systems that give life meaning collapse, humanity is left staring into the abyss. For centuries, religion provided the foundation of moral order and existential purpose. People believed in a divine plan, in eternal truths that gave their struggles a sense of direction. But Nietzsche saw that this foundation was crumbling. He declared, "God is dead, not as a celebration, but as a warning." Humanity, he said, had killed God, not literally, but through the rise of rationalism, science, and the relentless questioning of all traditions. And without that foundation, he warned, we would face a crisis unlike any before, a spiritual void at the heart of modern civilization. Look around today, and Nietzsche's prophecy seems to echo everywhere. The decline of religious belief, the rise of moral relativism, the obsession with material success, all are symptoms of the same disease. The more we rely on technology to fill our days, the more disconnected we feel. We are surrounded by noise, yet haunted by silence within. Many live as if meaning can be found in likes, money, or fame, only to discover that these things satisfy nothing of the soul. Psychologists like Viktor Frankl, deeply influenced by Nietzsche, called this the existential vacuum, a sense of inner emptiness that drives people to seek distraction instead of purpose. Frankl observed that when meaning is lost, people become vulnerable to despair, addiction, and apathy. Isn't that precisely what we see in today's world? But here lies the paradox. Nietzsche didn't merely predict the fall into nihilism. He saw it as a necessary stage in humanity's evolution. He believed that only by destroying the old illusions could we build something greater. The death of God, in his eyes, was also the birth of a new kind of freedom, a terrifying and liberating invitation to create meaning ourselves. Still, most people never reach that second stage. They remain trapped in what Nietzsche called passive nihilism, the quiet resignation that nothing matters. You can see it in the eyes of those scrolling endlessly through social media, in the cynicism that calls every ideal naive, in the exhaustion that comes from living without a deeper why. Nietzsche would call this the sickness of modernity, the decline of purpose in an age of endless choice. But what happens when a civilization collectively loses its sense of meaning, when the majority no longer believes in truth, beauty, or moral direction? Nietzsche foresaw that society would drift into chaos, not necessarily violent but spiritual, a slow decay of values where comfort replaces conviction and distraction replaces direction. And that is precisely what we are witnessing today. Still, Nietzsche's message was never one of despair. He offered a challenge to rise beyond nihilism, to become the creator of new values, to forge purpose where none seems to exist. But before we can reach that transformation, we must understand the roots of this crisis. So ask yourself, where do you find meaning? Is it in faith, in art, in love, in self-overcoming? Or have you, like so many today, begun to sense that the old sources of purpose no longer hold power? As we continue, we'll uncover the deeper psychological and cultural forces that have fueled the rise of nihilism, and how Nietzsche's vision of the Übermensch, the higher self, offers not only an escape from meaninglessness, but a rebirth of the human spirit itself. To understand why nihilism has become so dominant in our age, we must first see how modern society itself was built upon the very foundations Nietzsche warned would crumble. The Enlightenment, with its triumph of reason over faith, liberated humanity from superstition, but it also stripped away the transcendent meaning that once held the human soul together. Science gave us progress, medicine, and technology, but it also left us with a haunting question. If there is no divine plan, then what is all this progress for? Nietzsche saw that once objective meaning collapses, individuals will be left to drift, searching desperately for something, anything, or to fill the void. In The Gay Science, he described the madman running through the marketplace, proclaiming that God is dead, and warning that we have wiped away the horizon. Humanity had freed itself from its old chains, but in doing so it also lost its compass, and that is exactly where we find ourselves today. The modern world offers more freedom than ever before, yet people feel more lost, anxious, and purposeless than any generation before them. Depression and loneliness are epidemic, communities are disintegrating, and even relationships are increasingly transactional and superficial. The question Nietzsche asked more than a century ago echoes louder than ever. If God is dead, what meaning remains? Psychologically, this crisis runs deep. Carl Jung, one of the most influential psychologists of the 20th century, argued that when collective symbols of meaning collapse, the human psyche suffers fragmentation. Jung believed that the spiritual symbols of religion were not mere superstition, but vital structures of the unconscious mind. Without them, he said, we fall into chaos, into the abyss of nihilism. Jung wrote that the gods have become diseases, meaning that the divine powers once projected outward now live as disorders within us: anxiety, addiction, confusion, and despair. This inner fragmentation is what Nietzsche anticipated. When we lose contact with higher ideals, the self begins to disintegrate. In a society obsessed with productivity and consumption, people become human machines, driven by routine rather than meaning. Work becomes mechanical, relationships become utilitarian, and identity becomes something we curate rather than live. We seek validation through numbers, followers, likes, views, because the old sources of validation have died. But here's the most dangerous part. Nihilism doesn't always appear as despair. Often it hides beneath the illusion of happiness. People tell themselves they are free, free to do whatever they want, free from moral constraints, free from faith. But this so-called freedom becomes another form of slavery. Without purpose, freedom becomes directionless. Without a compass, every path looks the same. And so, in the name of freedom, people choose what numbs them rather than what elevates them. Nietzsche called this the age of the last man, a figure who avoids suffering, avoids struggle, and lives only for comfort. The last man seeks entertainment instead of enlightenment, pleasure instead of purpose. He believes he has reached the end of history, that there is nothing left to strive for. Nietzsche described him with biting irony. They have left the regions where it was hard to live, for one needs warmth. One still loves one's neighbor and rubs against him, for one needs warmth. Doesn't that sound hauntingly familiar? In our digital age, we cling to the illusion of connection, endless messages, likes, and notifications, yet true intimacy and purpose fade. The last man scrolls endlessly, consuming without creating, comfortable but empty. Nietzsche's prediction has become reality, a civilization of comfort and convenience, yet starved for meaning. And yet, Nietzsche did not hate humanity. He pitied it, but he also believed in its potential. He saw nihilism not as the end, but as the beginning of something new. What is falling we should also push, he said. In other words, the collapse of old values was not to be resisted, but embraced as the necessary destruction before rebirth. Humanity must go through the desert of meaninglessness before it can find a new dawn. But how can one live in a world without objective meaning and still find purpose? Nietzsche's answer was radical: by becoming a creator of values. Instead of clinging to inherited beliefs, he urged us to become self-overcomers, individuals who shape their own meaning through strength, courage, and creativity. This is the foundation of his idea of the Übermensch, the higher self who transcends the emptiness of nihilism. However, before that transformation can happen, Nietzsche insisted that we must first confront the abyss. We must dare to face the terrifying truth that there is no inherent meaning in the universe. Only then, when all illusions have been stripped away, can we begin to build meaning from within. So the real question becomes, are we brave enough to face that abyss? Or will we continue to distract ourselves, pretending that endless comfort and consumption will fill the void? As we move forward, we'll explore how Nietzsche's vision of the Übermensch was not just philosophical but profoundly psychological, and how it offers a way to rebuild meaning in an age where everything seems meaningless. To truly grasp Nietzsche's solution to the rise of nihilism, we must first understand his idea of the Übermensch, often mistranslated as Superman, but more accurately meaning overman, or the one who transcends. This concept is not about physical strength or domination. It is about the spiritual evolution of humanity, the transformation of the human being who has faced the death of old values and dared to create new ones. Nietzsche believed that when humanity lost faith in absolute truths, it entered a dangerous void. But he did not see this void as pure destruction. He saw it as an open field, a blank canvas upon which new meaning could be written. Man is something that shall be overcome, he wrote in Thus Spoke Zarathustra. The human being, in Nietzsche's eyes, is not an end point, but a bridge, a fragile transition between what we are and what we can become. The Übermensch represents this next step, the one who creates his own values, his own purpose, his own truth. Where others see despair, he sees opportunity. Where others surrender to emptiness, he transforms it into creation. Nietzsche's vision was that of a new human being who takes the raw chaos of existence and forges from it a personal meaning so powerful that it gives shape to life itself. But Nietzsche also warned that very few would ever reach this stage. Most people, he said, would remain trapped in what he called herd morality, the comfortable collective mindset that seeks safety and conformity. The herd follows ready-made values handed down by society, religion, or ideology. They prefer belonging to becoming. They avoid the pain of thinking for themselves. And yet, Nietzsche argued, true freedom demands that we risk isolation. You must be ready to burn yourself in your own flame, he wrote. How could you rise anew if you have not first become ashes? This is the core of Nietzsche's rebellion against nihilism, the courage to destroy illusions, not for destruction's sake, but for rebirth. He believed that only by passing through the fire of meaninglessness could we emerge purified, capable of creating meaning from our own strength. Think about this in the context of today's world. Modern society often sells the illusion of individuality. Be yourself, follow your dreams. Yet it simultaneously pressures everyone to think, feel, and live in the same patterns. True individuality has been replaced by a mass-produced version of authenticity. We dress differently but think the same. We proclaim independence but fear standing apart. Nietzsche would say that this is the tragedy of the modern human being, to confuse conformity with freedom. Psychologically, Nietzsche's Übermensch can be seen as a metaphor for integration and wholeness. Carl Jung interpreted it as the process of individuation, the journey toward becoming a complete self. Jung wrote that the Übermensch is not beyond good and evil, but beyond the collective moral code, someone who has internalized their own values and lives in harmony with their inner truth. It's not about rejecting morality, but transcending it, rising above borrowed beliefs to live by a personal, deeply felt sense of meaning. This process, however, demands suffering. Nietzsche was unflinching about this truth. One must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star, he said. In other words, out of inner conflict and struggle comes creation and transformation. Without suffering, there can be no depth. Without challenge, no growth. The Übermensch does not escape pain. He transforms it into strength. Now think of how our modern culture treats suffering. We avoid it at all costs. We medicate it, distract it, silence it. But Nietzsche believed suffering was not the enemy. It was the path. Every great transformation, he argued, begins with a confrontation with pain. It's through our wounds that we discover our will to power, that inner force that drives us to overcome, to rise, to affirm life, even in the face of despair. The will to power was Nietzsche's answer to the question, what replaces God? It is not a doctrine of domination, but a philosophy of becoming. Life, he said, is not about preservation or comfort, but about growth, creation, and self-overcoming. Everything living strives to expand its strength, its creativity, its potential. When this natural drive is suppressed, when people choose comfort over challenge, the will to power turns inward, becoming resentment, self-hatred, and despair. And from that, nihilism grows. This is why Nietzsche saw the Übermensch as the antidote to the modern sickness of meaninglessness. The one who embraces life in all its chaos and pain, who dares to say yes to existence even when it offers no guarantees, becomes truly free. This is the revaluation of all values that Nietzsche called for, a complete transformation of how we view meaning, morality, and ourselves. So perhaps the most urgent question is this: how can we, ordinary individuals, live according to these principles? How can we overcome nihilism in our own lives and become creators of meaning rather than consumers of illusion? In the next part, we'll explore how Nietzsche's ideas can be applied in the real world, how to cultivate strength, purpose, and authenticity in a society drowning in distraction and spiritual emptiness. And more importantly, we'll uncover the final, most powerful truth Nietzsche left behind, one that can change not only how we see the world, but how we live within it. We have reached the heart of Nietzsche's prophecy, and the moment where his vision becomes not just philosophy, but a call to transformation. Nietzsche never wanted humanity to sink into despair. He wanted us to wake up. The rise of nihilism, he believed, was not the end of meaning, but the beginning of its rebirth. The old gods had died, but new creators could rise. Not divine beings, but human beings who dare to give life their own sacred meaning. In a world where everything feels uncertain, Nietzsche's message is shockingly relevant. We live surrounded by abundance, yet starved for purpose. We have more information than ever, but less wisdom. We've gained comfort, but lost conviction. And so the question Nietzsche asked in the 19th century now burns within the 21st. How can we live meaningfully when nothing seems to mean anything? Nietzsche's answer was both terrifying and liberating. We must become creators of meaning. We must dare to face existence without illusions and still choose to affirm it. Amor fati, the love of fate, was one of his most beautiful ideas. To love your fate means to embrace every joy, every pain, every moment as necessary and worthy. It is to say yes to life as it is, not as we wish it to be. Imagine living that way. Imagine seeing every hardship not as punishment, but as a test of strength. Every loss not as tragedy, but as transformation. Every limitation not as curse, but as the very forge that shapes your soul. This, Nietzsche believed, was the path out of nihilism, not through denial of suffering, but through its acceptance and transcendence. It is a message that echoes in modern psychology as well. Viktor Frankl, a survivor of the Nazi concentration camps and founder of logotherapy, drew directly from Nietzsche when he said, "Those who have a why to live can bear almost any how." Frankl discovered that meaning could not be given. It must be created. Even in the darkest conditions, he found that people who could assign purpose to their suffering, whether through love, faith, or creative will, were able to survive. Those who could not perished. Today, our suffering takes a different form. Not physical imprisonment, but spiritual paralysis. We are surrounded by comfort, yet trapped in meaninglessness, and perhaps that is an even greater test. The challenge of our age is not survival, but significance. How do we live deeply when everything around us is shallow? How do we find truth in a world that worships appearances? Nietzsche's philosophy gives us a starting point. First, we must confront the abyss honestly. We must stop escaping into distractions and face the silence within. It is there, in that terrifying stillness, that self-awareness begins. Second, we must take responsibility for our lives, not blaming society, or God, or fate, but choosing to be the authors of our own story. And finally, we must act. Creation is the antidote to despair. To create, a thought, an artwork, a gesture of kindness, a new perspective, is to rebel against the void. Nietzsche called this the great affirmation. To look at existence with all its chaos and cruelty and still declare, yes, I want this again. That is the highest expression of strength. It is not naive optimism, but profound courage, the courage to live without guarantees. But Nietzsche also warned of what would happen if humanity refused this challenge. He foresaw an era dominated by mediocrity, comfort, and distraction, an age where the last man would reign. The last man is satisfied with comfort, entertainment, and the illusion of progress, but he has lost his soul. They blink, Nietzsche said of them, and they have invented happiness. They no longer believe in greatness or sacrifice or transcendence, only in safety. Does that not sound like the very spirit of our time? We chase pleasure but fear purpose. We worship comfort but avoid courage. We are surrounded by knowledge but lack wisdom. Nietzsche's warning was not against science or progress. It was against the spiritual emptiness that comes when we forget why we live. So perhaps the real rebellion today is not to reject the world, but to affirm it, consciously, passionately, and creatively. To find meaning not in what is given, but in what we give back. To live as if each moment were a canvas upon which we paint our own values. Nietzsche once wrote, "Become who you are." Simple words, but they hold a universe of truth. Becoming who you are means peeling away the masks, the borrowed opinions, the fears that keep you small. It means daring to live authentically, even if that authenticity sets you apart. It means above all taking responsibility for your existence, because no one else can live your life for you. And so, in the face of nihilism, Nietzsche's message stands like a torch in the dark. Do not despair. The collapse of meaning is not the end. It is the invitation to create. The death of old values is the birth of freedom, and the abyss you fear to face is the same abyss that reflects back your own power. Ask yourself, what will you create from your pain? What truth will you live even if the world mocks it? What star will you give birth to from your inner chaos? Perhaps this is what Nietzsche meant when he said that one must still have chaos in oneself to give birth to a dancing star, because only those who have faced the darkness can truly understand the value of light. So, if nihilism is taking over the modern world, let it. Let it burn away the false idols, the hollow beliefs, the empty distractions. But do not let it take you. Rise above it. Become the creator, not the consumer, the giver of meaning, not the seeker of it. For Nietzsche, this was the ultimate destiny of humankind, not to live under borrowed truths but to create new ones. And that perhaps is the only way to truly overcome the emptiness of our age, to stand before the void, and instead of collapsing into it, declare, "I will give this life meaning." Thanks for looking.